Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lightning Talks presented by the Seattle Aquarium. I'm Jim Wharton. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Conservation Engagement and Learning here at the aquarium. Now, the aquarium is located on the shores of Puget Sound in the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, but tonight's event is 100% virtual, and we're really happy to be welcoming you from wherever you call home, and we hope that you and yours are staying safe and healthy and warm. Now, tonight's event is all about octopuses. Yes, that is the correct plural. Now, if you're the kind of person who enjoys tuning in for science talks on a Thursday night, then I think that you'll enjoy what we have in store for you this evening. Now, if you've seen that documentary, Octopus Teacher on Netflix, then you probably have gotten a sense of just how fascinating these creatures can be. The idea behind this event is to introduce you to new ideas about octopuses, and maybe challenge the way you've thought about them in the past. Now, the speakers this evening are going to be coming to you and bringing you ideas from the deep sea, from Puget Sound, from all over the world, and really right into your living room. Now, octopuses are so fascinating to me because I think when I look at an octopus, I see something that is so strange and so alien and yet so familiar. And so I see something that doesn't look like me, doesn't move like me. It lives in an environment that is nothing like the environment that I live in. But then when I look again, I see an animal that's intelligent. I see an animal that's creative. I see an animal with purpose. And so there's so much to learn about octopuses, and I'm really excited to learn about them alongside all of you this evening. Now, if you've never been to or experienced a lightning talk before, this is what you have in store. 5 speakers will have 5 minutes each to get across one big idea, and not 1 second more. So at 1 minute, they'll get a green light. At 30 seconds, they'll see a yellow light. And if they run out of time, they'll first see a red light, and then they'll get one of these. Now, we're going to keep things moving tonight, so we're not going to stop in between speakers for questions, but we want to have a great Q&A at the end of the evening after the talks are done. So please do put your questions and comments into the chat, and we're going to collect those and come back after the talks are done and have a great Q&A with all of our speakers. And who knows, you might even see one of your comments or questions find their way onto our screen. Now, if you enjoy programs like this and would like to support the Seattle Aquarium, please consider a donation. These are weird and trying times, and your support matters more than it ever has. And when you make a donation to the Seattle Aquarium, you're joining us in our mission of inspiring conservation of our marine environment. Now, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and I always say that because it's always true. And we're going to start out with Stephanie Bush, who's going to take us to the deep sea and meet some pretty strange and fascinating and wonderful little octopuses. We're going to have Henry Carson tell us a little bit about the protected areas in Puget Sound dedicated to octopuses and what makes them really special. Kathryn Kegel is going to tell you what life is like for octopuses here at the Seattle Aquarium. Qiaz Hua is going to tell us, how is climate change affecting octopuses? And then finally, David Scheel is going to give us some information about the octopuses in relationships, both domestic and wild, which I think will be pretty wild. But with no further ado, I'm excited to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Stephanie Bush. Stephanie Bush works in marine biodiversity for the Smithsonian's Museum of Natural History. But she's going to be telling you a little bit tonight about some animals that she encountered during her graduate work in California using remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, to explore the deep sea and discover some pretty fascinating creatures. Stephanie, are you all set to kick us off tonight?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm glad to hear that so many people are joining us today that are interested in learning more about octopuses. Now, all the videos and beautiful images you saw in the introductory video are nothing like what I'm going to be talking about. But fortunately, the other speakers will be. Jim said I'm going to take you on a deep dive into the darker depths of the ocean. So the deep sea starts at about 200 meters. Now that's a scientific, cutoff. Of course, it varies a little bit by how much material is in the water, but basically that's the point at which there's not really very much or any sunlight left for animals to use for seeing. So essentially the octopuses that I'm going to be talking about for the next 5 minutes live their entire lives in darkness with regard to sunlight. Now, there's bioluminescence. Of course, I don't have time to talk about that. But anyway, so let's get going. Oh, first, I have a question for you all. And obviously, I won't be able to hear your response. But just before we get into this, tell yourself or the person next to you which type of octopus you think this one that's been replaying in this video here is. What is it, a DUMBO octopus or a pancake octopus? A little bit of a trick question because I'm going to tell you how to tell the difference, but maybe some people already know. Anyway, so as I said, I will not be talking about the shallow water, although some species live in the deep as well. What the group is known as incirata or incirate octopuses. There's a line drawn left. Those are the ones that most people are familiar with. They can change color. They can change the texture of their skin. Their arms go in and out of crevices. They twist and turn, fit through small spaces, do all kinds of amazing things. And then there's the other group, which are still amazing, but in very different ways. And that group is called the cirrata, over on the right. What you first notice is they have fins. So sometimes people call these finned octopuses. They are only found in the deep sea. Another thing to note is that they have a more well-developed web in between their arms in a lot of cases. And that helps them stay in the water column because a lot of they spend much more they spend much more time in the water column than your typical shallow water octopus that will only basically swim when it's in danger and it jet escapes. I'm not going to go through all the different kinds, of course. I'm going to talk to you about the ones known as DUMBO octopuses and flapjack or pancake octopuses. So where are they called cirrate octopuses? This is not something that you could actually see on the previous slide. They're called cirrate because they have cirri, or a single cirrus is a slender tendril or a hair-like filament. So you can see on these images on the left, the upper left, there is one of this row of these cirri. Now, the image in the bottom center, you can see that species has really small. I can barely see them in the image. So, of course, there's variability between the species, but these cirri are what gives this group its name. One other thing, and I want to, if any of you were present throughout the whole introductory video, there was one question whether octopuses have bones. And it's true, they do have bones, but their beak is not the only hard part in them, at least with respect to cirrate octopuses. They do actually have a cartilaginous shell. So, it's like your ear because your ear is made of cartilage. And you can see on the left, there's a line drawings of the different shapes that occur in the different genera of cirrate octopuses. And on the right, I just took one of those images that's from a Grimpoteuthis or a DUMBO octopus and put it within the line drawing of a DUMBO octopus on the to show you the placement. So basically the fins connect to the shell there, and that's, that gives the fins something to attach to, but also some stability within the body so that they can use those fins. I'm getting very low on time, of course.
Yep, you got the lightning. That's okay. It's 5 minutes comes fast, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Well, thank you. That the first octopus you showed, was everybody right? It was a DUMBO octopus?
Yes. Well, I can't see the people's guesses because I don't have the chat on, but
Yep. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much. The flapjack and demo octopuses are just ridiculously cute. Octopuses are kind of cool already, but those animals are just bananas how cute they are. Our next speaker is Henry Carson. And Henry's a local. He grew up in Washington. He's been snorkeling and diving in Puget Sound for 30 years. He studied marine invertebrates and graduate and postgraduate work in California and Hawaii before returning to Washington to work for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, where he leads the shellfish dive team. So, Henry, are you ready to tell us a little bit about those octopus protected areas?
I am.
All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you. The story I'm going to tell you today is how the octopus conservation areas came to be in the Puget Sound in 2013. And it really gets to the heart of a philosophical question, I think, about our relationship between humans and octopuses. Are they our friends? Are they food? Are they both? The story is not really mine, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And I'm gathering a lot of the details from the story from reporting on it, which was in the local media and also the national media, as I'll show you. So the story starts here with this fellow, a 19-year-old at the time, resident of Washington from Maple Valley, community college student, interested in local foraging of food. And actually, as one of his class assignments, I decided to really go for an A and draw his food and capture a live octopus. So he went about a lot of training. He went down to a swimming pool. He had friends try to rip his regulator and mask off to simulate wrestling with an octopus. He made sure it was legal. Went and got a shellfish license at the local Walmart. And he got ready to go take his octopus. This was in October of 2012. He went down to, the controversy really started because he chose to take that octopus from Cove 2 on Alki Beach. You can see in this photo the Seattle skyline right behind him. And as you can imagine, it's a popular dive site. He did manage to get this very large octopus, so it's a good thing he practiced wrestling underwater. He managed to get this very large octopus you see here out of the water, much to the dismay of many local divers that were diving that day, that had developed a relationship with octopus. Perhaps this particular one knew where it was. And as many of us divers have this, emotional relationship to these beautiful, intelligent creatures. So seeing one being pummeled and drugged from the water and put in the back of a pickup to go home and eat was very shocking. They took these photos. And it soon started quite a local and then national controversy as news outlets picked up the story. Nowadays, we might be sadly used to nasty online comments, but I think in 2012, it was shocking to see, death threats against this person. That it made it all the way to the New York Times. Here's a picture of that coverage. It's a very interesting article. And it also kind of juxtaposed the outrage over this harvest with some of the local restaurants in Seattle that had a local sustainable food movement starting, had rave reviews for some octopus-based dishes in local restaurants. So again, this question is what is our relationship to octopus? This fell in the lap, of course, of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. And so they started by forming an advisory group. They had a lot of commission meetings about it to see what to do about this controversy. And they got over 400 public comments. They really ran the gamut. Some, especially from the dive community, advocated for a total ban on the harvest of these beautiful creatures. And then others from more the fishing community said, I think the status quo is okay. I think what we have is all right. One of the outcomes of this advisory group and all these meetings, and I should say that the harvester did come down and speak and apologized for the shocking scene in one of these meetings. But one of the outcomes was that for the information that we had, and the Seattle Aquarium was very helpful in gathering a lot of that information with their octopus counts. The information we had, the Puget Sound population of giant Pacific octopus appeared pretty large, pretty stable. We know they're fast-growing animals. They have really short generation times. They only live 3 to 5 years. Pretty effective at reproducing. All that means to a population biologist that they can sustain a harvest, and also that the level of harvest it was not very high. So kind of got to another question, do we need a species to be endangered in order to save it or in order to protect it? And kind of playing into this whole story, of course, is a huge economic benefit to the state for people wanting to come to Washington to see these octopuses for which we are famous. So in the end, they came up with this compromise, and it's a map I'm showing you here on the left side of your screen, where they established 7 new no-take areas for octopus on popular dive sites. The northernmost one is up in Deception Pass, and then the other 6 are in circles on the map in the Seattle and Tacoma area. Those added to a lot of places where it was already illegal to take an octopus. Those included some of the small marine protected area squares, and then also the entirety of Hood Canal there on the left side. So the attempt at the compromise was to allow some continued harvest and for people that want to hunt octopuses to do so, but also to protect these really popular dive sites so that people, like what happened at Cove 2 doesn't happen again, and people don't have to see a beloved octopus being taken. And we can continue to have the benefit of having these places, the draw of these octopus and show off these creatures. So I think it was a great compromise, and I'll stop there.
All right. Well, thank you, Henry. One of the things I love about that story, and it really makes me proud of our community, that we chose to protect a species not because it was on the brink of extinction, not because its numbers were so down, but because of how important it was to us. It was really a cultural value that spurred us to create these protected areas, and I think that's pretty special and probably pretty unique, isn't it?
I think it is, and it's a tough balancing act, because as I think the point of my talk is that different people have different relationships to octopuses.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really loved your talk. And, Henry's going to be back again at the end for questions. So if you have questions about the octopus protected areas or anything else that Henry will be able to answer, he'll be back not too long. So thanks a lot, Henry. We'll see you very soon. And our next speaker is our own Kathryn Kegel. So Kathryn is a senior aquarist at the Seattle Aquarium, where she's worked for 15 years as a member of the cold water fish and invertebrate team. Kathryn is our very own octopus whisperer, and she's here to tell us a little bit more about what life is like for octopuses at the Seattle Aquarium. Are you ready to go, Kathryn?
I hope so.
All right. Ready or not, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. So I am going to be telling you basically about the life of an octopus at the aquarium, basically from collection all the way to release. So we have 2 primary collection areas that we go to. Obviously, the Puget Sound. We are lucky to be on the Puget Sound, and we actually find octopuses sometimes right underneath our pier. So it's a great habitat and a great place to find them. We also go all the way out to the northern tip of Washington to a town called Neah Bay, another great, beautiful habitat for octopuses and a great place for them. So for actual collection, it's generally done by boat and done by scuba divers. And as you can see in these images, we're spending a lot of time on the floor, just kind of looking under rocks and crevices and ledges, trying to find these animals. And this is primarily what we're looking for. It's called an octopus midden. If you look at the bottom 2 images, you might be able to see some crab shells kind of hanging out in the rocks there. Octopuses tend to be very clean in their dens, but pretty messy in their front yards, which makes it a little bit easier to spot them. And that top image up there is an octopus kind of hunkered down in the den, but that's pretty much how we spot them underwater. Once we do get an octopus back to the aquarium, it goes through a process called quarantine. It's probably a word we've all become quite familiar with this year. But for an octopus, quarantine basically means that it has to hit a couple of benchmarks before it can go out on display. So this is an image of our holding area. One of the things that we have to get done is a vet check. Our vet will come down, make sure the animal is healthy and is in good shape. We do allow an adjustment period for the animal. So this animal is coming from the wild and is now in the care of humans. So there has to be a little bit of an adjustment period for that animal. And then we want to make sure that the animal is up and feeding well. So what does an octopus eat? We try and mimic their natural diet as best we can. So we give them a variety of food items like crab, shrimp, clam, squid, and a couple different types of fish. And these guys are used to hunting live food. So now we're transitioning them to dead food and previously frozen food. So this is where we have an opportunity to really make a connection with the octopus. And this will help make the transition in their time at the aquarium with us a little bit easier. We want them to associate us with a positive experience. So when we have to do vet checks or weigh them or move them, that it's a very positive experience. The other thing we do a lot of is something called enrichment. These are food puzzles, but this is an opportunity to highlight the animal's natural behaviors, kind of keep them mentally stimulated. We can put food in those objects and have them open it up. This is another type of enrichment that we stumbled across. We found out that they really like to play in the water droplets on the surface. So when we were just cleaning our windows one day, we realized how much they enjoy that. So once the animal clears the quarantine process, it gets to go out on display. And this is where the public actually gets to see the animal. And this is where all the education, and you can get up close and personal with these animals, and we can really teach people about how cool they are. And this is a quick video of how Kraken, who is on display right now, actually got into the enclosure. So there he goes. Every animal is a little bit different when they're on display. This is an octopus that actually decided it wanted to rearrange the habitat a little bit, which they, of course, are more than welcome to do. And this is a pretty natural behavior for them to be digging out a den and moving rocks around. They also really love anything that goes inside the exhibit. So we have some cleaning tools there that anything that pretty much goes in there, the animal grabs and wants to hang on to. It also likes to interact with our divers, and I'm sure they're trying to be helpful, but they're not always that helpful. But really, what happens at the end of this is called octopus senescence. It's the end of their life. This is the point in which they're transitioning to being ready to mate and ready to go back out in the wild. So because we are right on the Puget Sound and are able to release these animals, when they start to show signs of being at the end of their life, that is when we let them go. And I've got a quick video here of one of our octopuses getting released back out into Nia Bay. So we will drive the animal all the way out there and send this animal back out to the wild, where it can continue to live the rest of its life, find a mate, and continue the species. And I think that is it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathryn. That was great. I'm wondering, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You've had a lot of octopuses in your care. Do you have a favorite?
I do actually. There was one that was named Odie that he got really big. He got up over 70 pounds, and we all just really enjoyed having him around. So he was definitely my favorite. Wow,
that was super easy. I thought you would hem and haw and say they're all my favorites, but no, it's Odie. No question.
Yeah, it was Odie.
All right. Well, if you have questions for Kathryn or about the octopuses at the Seattle Aquarium, please do put those in the chat. And stick around for the Q&A later. We'll see Kathryn again soon. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And our next speaker is Qiaz Hua. Qiaz grew up in Singapore, where she graduated with a biomedical degree and worked in the environmental research field for a few years before, inspired by a newfound love of octopuses, she moved to South Australia, where she now studies octopuses by combining the fields of molecular and marine biology. Qiaz, are you ready to take us to our next talk?
Yep, I am.
All right, the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Okay, so I'll be talking about the battle between the octopus and the climate crisis. So octopuses are known to be highly intelligent, flexible, and adaptable. And if you put them up against sharks, they are capable of escaping the situation by putting an arm in the gills of the shark. Through evolution, they have also lost their shells entirely, leaving their vulnerable soft bodies exposed to predators. But that isn't a problem either, because they are capable of finding empty shells that can be used as their mobile home. But will these amazing traits of the octopus be useful when you put them up against the climate crisis? So what the climate crisis entails is what we have seen, heard, or felt through, for example, the melting of polar ice caps, increasing number and intensity of extreme weather events, global warming, and ocean acidification as a result of carbon emissions. And the thing about marine ecosystems is that they are especially vulnerable to this global threat because oceans have already absorbed more than 80% of the heat added to the global climate system and 30% of the total carbon dioxide produced by human activities. And as a result, ocean temperatures have already increased by 1 degree and increased in acidity by 26%. And it's projected that the oceans will continue to heat up by 2 degrees and acidify by a further 109%. So now the question is, how are the octopuses responding to this environmental change? So now we take a look at what scientists have found so far. So the higher temperatures do allow octopuses to hatch faster, as reflected by shorter durations of embryonic development. But it does not mean that if temperatures continually rise forever, the hatching time will be shorter and shorter because it's not a linear relationship. And that's because physiologically, there is always a limit to how much the body can tolerate the environmental conditions that it is exposed to. And this is also shown by these other findings, such as having fewer eggs that hatched when it's beyond their thermal threshold. The reproductive system was also affected, which is not a good thing because it's essential in replenishing the population numbers. And they were also found to have higher stress levels. As for ocean acidification, naturally the blood becomes more acidic. And the problem is that oxygen transporters, or in the octopus case, hemocyanin, they need the right pH to function properly. And so as a result, less oxygen can be transported. And there is a recent publication that studied the effects of ocean acidification on octopuses, and they did show that they are indeed less able to cope with the lack of oxygen. And let's not forget that oxygen does not dissolve well in warmer water. And so the combination of ocean warming and acidification very much decreases the amount of oxygen available. So it seems that from these preliminary studies, the octopus may actually succumb to climate change, especially if environmental conditions don't improve, although there is still a lack of research done. And so I'm hoping to find out under both ocean warming and acidification, how will the octopus respond? So another important point is that the octopus goes through different life stages, which starts from an egg through to a hatchling before it matures into an adult. And we would expect that these major life stages will have different levels of vulnerability, with the embryonic stage being the most vulnerable. So for my research, I'll be focusing on the egg stage of a commercially significant yet understudied species called the southern keeled octopus, which is found in Southeast Australia, and hopefully find out how well or how bad the octopus is doing in this climate crisis. So with that, I'd like to end off with one of my favorite quotes by Sir David Attenborough. We need to rediscover how to be sustainable to move from being apart from nature to becoming a part of nature once again. Thank you.
Oh, Qiaz, thank you so much. And thank you for ending on that quote. That's really consistent with the way that the Seattle Aquarium looks at conservation generally. I think often we think of people as bad for nature, and that's because often the things that we do have an impact on nature. But when we think of people as bad for nature, the solution becomes removing people from nature. And I don't think that really works out either. So I love that quote that you shared. I think that's just perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Qiaz. If you have questions up for Qiaz later on, and we're almost to the Q&A, please do drop those in the chat. Thank you very much. Now, our final speaker, and I can't believe it's already our final speaker, but our final speaker is David Scheel. David is a professor of marine biology at Alaska Pacific University. He is a behavioral ecologist with expertise in predator-prey relationships and cephalopod behavior. So it's appropriate that he's going to let us in on some secrets about how cephalopods behave, maybe even in living rooms. So, David, are you ready?
I'm ready, Jim. Thank you.
All right, bring us home.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Where do we stand in relationship to octopuses? Do we regard them as objects of fascination, or do we develop relationships with them? And for that matter, do they develop relationships with us? I want to talk today about octopuses in wild and domestic relationships. I've been studying octopuses since 1995 with a wide array of collaborators and supporters who have helped me stand in my own relationship to octopuses. What can be said about the sorts of relationships octopuses might have? A relationship can be defined as the stance or attitude with which two or more connected beings regard each other. Octopuses are widely considered intelligent, yet a key context for the evolution of animal intelligence is that a species be long-lived and have a social life history. Octopuses display neither of these. So, do octopuses form relationships with others? In behavior, we expect relationships to be expressed as some sort of adaptive reactions to context during interactions with another. For example, octopuses attack food, shrink from predators, and recognize potential mates. Such roles are not limited to octopuses. They're ubiquitous in the biological world. Octopuses recognize agency. Here we see an octopus that has responded to an image of a sea lion as to an agent of concern in the environment. The octopus, on seeing the predator, slowly crept into its den and hid. Octopuses also respond differently to categories of prey, such as catching a scallop versus catching a fish. Similarly, octopuses are found in non-trophic relationships. Octopuses pay attention to fish, who pay attention to them, and this may include signaling and cooperation. Octopuses also signal to each other, and these signals predict the outcomes of agonistic interactions. Here you see two gloomy octopuses in Australia. One is standing tall and dark, associated with aggression. The other is low with a disruptive pattern. Octopuses at this site occupy these and other roles within their interactions. The intentional stance has been defined as recognizing agency by employing an internal model, a mental model, that predicts one sort of future episode rather than another by inferring intentions. While people adopt the intentional stance, philosophers have wondered whether any other non-primate animals are aware of agency in this way. Relationships comprise the intentional stance. Edelman, in this paper on this topic, considered octopuses to be a distant case and a major challenge. So we've now explored the minimal requirements that octopuses may have for a relationship. Octopuses in relation to others recognize different categories, recognize agency, attend to attention, and assume roles in relation to others. I now want to show you a brief video clip of an octopus in a relationship in my living room. The octopus's name is Thursday. Here we see Thursday on the left, and on the far right, my daughter Laurel is reaching into the tank. She is calling Thursday to her. Thursday, of course, is familiar with Laurel, who is her keeper. Thursday jumps up out of her den, hops up, ready to go to Laurel. Now Laurel has no bait. She's just wiggling her fingers, and here comes Thursday jumping up to say hello to Laurel. The video has stopped on my end, but nevertheless, we will proceed. So at least in this one case, the octopus Thursday seems to be in a relationship and have made friends with her person Laurel. You can read a bit more about octopuses in wild and domestic relationships in a paper that appeared in Social Science Information in 2018. You can also see another octopus, Heidi, interacting with her friend Laurel in the PBS nature documentary, Octopus Making Contact. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That's the idea of octopuses and relationships. I think it's so cool because it's what people want, right? That these animals are so fascinating and intelligent, and I think people want to believe that we can have these kind of relationships with them.
Now, octopuses seem to deliver when we expect that.
All right, so we're going to welcome all of our speakers back to the virtual stage. And now it's our opportunity to get some of those questions that have been percolating in the chat. And as we're sort of pulling a few together for us to ask our speakers, I'm really curious to know if any of our speakers have questions for each other. No questions for each other? Okay. So I've got a couple of questions here. And the first one I'm going to share is one from a first grader named Quentin. He wants to know, how long do octopuses live? And I know there's a lot of different kinds of octopuses out there, but maybe we could get a range, and then specifically about giant Pacific octopuses. So maybe Kathryn, would you like to tackle that?
Sure. Yeah. So the giant Pacific octopus lives about 3 to 5 years on general. Some species live a little bit longer and some live a little bit shorter than that.
Okay. Now, I saw a question in the chat, and I think I saw it answered, but just so that everybody saw it, how many different kinds of octopuses are there in Puget Sound? So Henry, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, we've got the giant Pacific octopus, and then we've got an octopus rubescens, or red octopus. And I'm not aware of many others. I know to the south of us there are several others, but those are the two main ones you would encounter in Puget Sound. Okay.
So David, you know that the film My Octopus Teacher has gotten so much attention. It's something that seems to have connected with a lot of people. I'm going to guess that perhaps you've seen it. What was your impression about the way that they told that story? Is what you saw the same kind of relationship that you saw building with Laurel and Thursday?
Well, it's always hard to tell in a video. Actually, these documentaries, of course, they're marvelous tools of communication, but they are edited, storied accounts, and so I think they did a stunning job, an absolutely stunning job in My Octopus Teacher. But I recognize also that it's an edited account of what happened, and I don't have any background knowledge of that particular interaction to be able to say, how that relationship would compare absent the editing.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. So we got a lot of questions coming in here. This is great. Kathryn, there are some questions about what kind of checks do you do with the octopuses to determine that they are healthy?
Yeah, so those checks are done by our vet and by our animal care staff. So we're looking at those animals every single day. Some of the basic things we're looking at is their skin. What color? Does it have any mucus buildup? Is there any injuries to the animal? We're looking at their eyes. We're looking at their breathing rate. We can even take a little scrape of the skin, just kind of slide it right over the top and look under a microscope and see if there's any parasites that might be living on the animal. But it happens at the very beginning by a vet who is very well trained in those things, and then throughout their entire time with us by our animal care staff.
So this is kind of a long shot. I'm not sure if you all know this or not, but I'm going to ask it just because it sounds super interesting. Does anybody know if there's any new research being done about the color changing capabilities of octopuses?
Yeah, there's more on a microscopic level. People are working on how they get the on their reflective cells, so how they reflect back white light, and to get white spots or whatever, and also the green blues that they don't produce, but they have sort of used structural coloration to get those colors, as opposed to actually their pigment-filled organs that create the browns and blacks and reds and oranges and yellows they have. So they have definitely many layers and multiple things going on for their color changing, and yeah, people are still working on that.
Yeah, and there's been some fascinating work done on how the octopus chooses objects or aspects of the environment that it then imitates on its skin for camouflage, and that's fairly recent and absolutely stunning work as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch it because it's not like it's it's almost like the color changes almost in a shimmering way, right? Like it just sort of, it's not like just like that. I mean, it's fast, but it's a pretty fascinating, it's a fascinating process. And you just think about the sort of mental capacity necessary to track and change all of those colors. It seems like there's a lot that that octopus intelligence has to take care of on a day-to-day basis.
One thing I'd like to remind everyone in the audience is that octopuses are colorblind as far as we know. So it makes all their color changing ability that much, and matching camouflaging that much more fascinating and amazing. So
that is amazing. So here's a question, I think for Henry, obviously, that the protected areas in Puget Sound, have you all seen any changes in the octopus population because of them? Is it too early to tell? What kind of impact do you think they've had?
I think the main thing with octopuses is they're sort of habitat limited. So in places where there's habitat, you're going to find them denning. And so I think, and harvest prior to the establishment was pretty low. We estimate, and the harvest is probably 50 to 100 animals are taken a year throughout the entire Puget Sound. So I think the conservation areas are super important to sort of lock in and have people know that when you go there, you're likely to see an octopus if you can find the appropriate habitat and get lucky, and it's not going to be taken because that's a place that people would know to go to take them. So I think that's more important than the actual overall. Now we're seeing more octopuses in these areas because they're habitat limited, and so where they can find, like the Alki junkyard, which is now protected, where they can find that junk, they're going to make a cool den and those middens that Kathryn showed.
Thank you. So we've got another question here I think is probably on the mind of a lot of our younger viewers, and maybe I could ask Qiaz to start with this. The question is, how does someone get started in a career of either marine science or marine conservation? I'm interested in your answer, Qiaz, because you did it twice. You sort of made two different entries into that career. So could you give us a sense of how that happened for you and any advice you'd give for young students?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit different for me because in my undergrad years at university, I did like a general life sciences program when I didn't know exactly what I wanted. And it's only after I graduated somewhere at that time that I decided that I should go into environmental research. And that's when I started looking for like jobs that are related to that. And then that slowly brought me to like particularly marine research. Because like while I was working, I like read books about octopus and decided, okay, I know that I want to do a PhD, and there is this like timely discovery of like, oh, okay, these octopuses are amazing, so why not do a PhD on it? So everything just fell together, and then I just started working on like finding suitable places and supervisors to study the octopuses. Yeah, so I guess like generally people normally start with going for a marine biology degree during the undergrad years. So that's also another path I can take. But I guess for me, what I've experienced is that even if you haven't had a degree in marine biology, you can still go into it.
How about any of the other panelists? Any advice you'd give to folks who are interested in studying octopuses or the ocean in general?
Become an amazing communicator. Communication's key.
Yeah, it could land you on a Lightning Talks event.
And networking, and kind of don't limit yourself. I did a similar thing to as Qiaz did. I actually knew for a long time that what I wanted to do in the long run was go to the tropics and study shallow water, color changing, texture changing, amazing octopuses. That's really what I ended up doing because I got an internship to study deep sea squids and noticed the octopuses there as well. So you never know where you're going to end up again. And so don't try and narrow yourself and take every opportunity that you can. Also agree with a general a broad scientific background. Don't narrow yourself. You don't necessarily need to get a marine biology degree. I just have a biology degree as well, and apparently it worked for me.
Yeah, and that's my undergrad is biology as well. So it seems like it makes sense to be broad and then specialize as you move through your education and experience, which could include volunteering. And we have a lot of volunteers at the Seattle Aquarium. Some of them have opportunities to work with the octopuses at times. So volunteering is another thing that I would advise people, because you have a chance to get a sense of what the real work is like. Because sometimes we go to school, we have an idea of what we think we want to do, and then you might get into that field and maybe it's something different than what you might have expected. So Kathryn, there's a lot of questions about how the octopuses adjust to life in the wild. It's not typical for animals to go back to the wild from aquarium life. And so how do our octopuses manage it?
Yeah, so probably one of the things that makes it the easiest for these animals is there's really no parental care. So everything that they need to know about hunting and living and surviving in the wild is already kind of ingrained in them. So spending a little bit of time in the care of humans really isn't going to diminish any of those skills. So when they go back, they still have all of the skills that they need to survive out there as far as hunting. We've actually released animals over the side for an event called Octopus Week, and we're following them with cameras, and we've actually seen octopuses hunt right in front of the camera. As soon as they get back in the water, they'll grab a snack right away. So that transition is pretty easy from them, because all the skills that they need is just very much hardwired into them, and they don't lose that while they're in the care of humans.
Nice. So this is a great question, I think, for Stephanie. Are there some octopuses that are bioluminescent?
There is so far one species of deep sea cerate octopus that has bioluminescence on its suckers. There's bioluminescence. So. And why do we think that those particular animals are bioluminescent? It's a question. There's a lot of things we don't know about deep sea octopuses because, of course, they're harder to observe. The hypothesis is that they use it to either attract prey or, startle a predator so that they get away. So that's kind of the typical answer for all the things we don't know about behaviors of animals in the deep ocean. Well, it's one of two things. Well, I guess it could be one of three. It could be a mate attraction and recognition thing as well. But those are the kind of three things. And like I said, there's so much more to know, not just about deep sea octopuses, but deep sea everything. So here's a question. So octopuses are super intelligent, and so there's a question about if octopuses sleep. Do octopuses sleep? David, you spend a lot of time with an octopus in your living room. Did Thursday take a nap here and there?
Thursday did go to bed in the evening when the lights went down, and generally got up in the morning. She did morning yoga, do some stretches in front of the den, spread out a little bit, and she was very tied into the light cycle. Thursday was a species known as Octopus cyanea. Its common name is the day octopus, and that's an octopus that's active during the daylight in tropical and near tropical environments. And so her schedule was very much like mine. It's easier to wake up when the lights are on. Many other species of octopuses are night octopuses, and they're active at night. They're nocturnal. It does vary by species what they do, but there have been 2 or 3 studies of, I think, Octopus vulgaris that showed that they sleep as well. And I've seen also giant Pacific octopuses sleep. And I have a student right now who's trying to study sleep in the red octopus that was mentioned earlier that is common in Puget Sound.
And Kathryn, we definitely see sleep-like behavior from our GPOs at the aquarium. What have you observed with those animals, which are more of a nocturnal species?
Yeah, the giant Pacific is much more of a nocturnal species. We kind of have a reverse light cycle for our GPOs while they're with us, because obviously we have lights on during the day, so the public is there, and the lights are off at night. So a lot of time when the staff comes in first thing in the morning and the lights are off, we definitely see that kind of completely pale, kind of sleeping octopus. And then as soon as we turn that lights on, they do kind of perk up a little bit. But even during the day, you'll often see them kind of up in a corner or tucked away, kind of just resting in what looks very much like sleep to me.
So we have a super informed audience, and some folks have heard about or read about the quote unquote intelligence that exists in octopus arms, or the distributed intelligence throughout their body. Would anybody like to talk a little bit about that? Octopuses have a brain in their head in the same way that we do, but they also have a pretty complicated neural network. Anyone care to tackle that?
Yeah, I think one of the craziest things that I read is that when you cut off the arm of an octopus, the arm can actually still like forage and look for food, and kind of do this like motion of putting the food back into the mouth that doesn't exist anymore, so they can kind of like think on their own.
So like a phantom limb, only opposite. It's like the opposite of a phantom limb. That's amazing. Any other comments about that? I mean, I think that it's one of the things that make octopuses so alien is that we know that they're intelligent, but their intelligence is incredibly different than ours. And so that's I know that some people like to think of them as almost alien creatures living on Earth.
Yeah, you can definitely see that each of those arms is sort of operating independent of each other, and they've got all of those suckers that they are manipulating all independently of each other and moving around and taking so much information, because all of those suckers are their taste buds, and they're figuring out, and they're all sending that information up to their central brain. So you can definitely see how having kind of individual little neural networks at each arm will help kind of process all that information that they have up to their central brain. It's very fascinating.
So Hank, as someone who's spent a lot of time in the water, I'm assuming that you've probably had interactions with octopuses while diving. And it's hard for me to imagine, but I know that some people are scared of octopuses, that they seem like they're scary or threatening. In your interactions with an octopus underwater, what has that been like? How have you felt about that interaction?
Yeah, my first reaction is always I feel lucky to have found one. They're fairly common around, but you can only spend so much time underwater searching new places. I don't have any fear of them at all. As I believe Kathryn mentioned, they're a nocturnal species, the giant Pacific octopus, which is the most common one I encounter. So they're usually trying to stay out of the way and sleep while I'm diving during the day. And any interaction I have with them is usually me bothering them. Usually we leave them alone and get about our other business, but a lot of times I can't resist trying to feed them, grabbing a crab that's around and just putting it in front of the den and holding it there. And usually you have to hold there for a while, but eventually they'll kind of send a little tentacle out and taste it, and then grab it and pull it back in. And we both go our own way.
I've read about divers who had sort of like interactions with octopuses where they seem curious. They're grabbing at dive gear or grabbing at masks and that sort of thing. I can see how that would be nerve-wracking, but that curiosity, I think, is one of the things I think is most fascinating about octopuses. We have a question here about some of the octopuses in the deep sea. So folks are used to thinking about octopuses in the shallow water. Is there a depth limit for octopuses? Is there a lot of diversity of octopuses in the deep sea? It seems like when you all were doing your work at in that Monterey Canyon, you were finding new stuff all the time, and the vampire squid from hell and all of these other sorts of things. Is that just a facet of we just don't know much about the deep sea and there's probably a lot more down there? Or is it something in particular about octopuses in that area of the ocean?
It's not really about octopuses in that part of the ocean. It's about the Monterey Submarine Canyon being the most explored part of the deep sea anywhere in the world. So, the more you look, the more you're going to find. as far as a depth limit I think it was just last year or in 2019, they broke the record for the deepest, for finding the deepest octopus. It was a non-fin octopus. I can't remember the depth, sorry. And then diversity in general in the deep ocean. Yeah, certainly as we explore the deep ocean more, we'll probably find more species. That one that they found that was deeper than the other one that anyone had located before is a new species. But overall, they're not going to be as near as diverse as shallow water species. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's a lot more to discover, but once we get to the point that they've all been discovered, hopefully, it will be much less because the deep ocean is not as variable as different shallow water habitats. About coral reefs, kelp forests, rocky reefs, there's so much variability. And while the deep sea is amazing and fascinating and awesome, it's not as variable. So
yeah, different kind of habitats, so different kind of things to sort of adapt to and sort of force that evolutionary, change over time.
Exactly.
So we've had a lot of questions about references and additional questions, certainly way more questions that we'll ever be able to get to, but we'll try to set up either a blog or through our social media accounts an ability to share some additional information. We're nearing the end of our time, but we had a question from a young viewer, and I'm super curious. What do each of you have a favorite species of octopus? And if so, what is that favorite species? And I will play as well, and I hope I don't steal anybody's thunder, but my favorite species of octopus has to be a mimic octopus. Those are pretty fascinating. If you've never heard of a mimic octopus, do yourself a favor and do a little searching on YouTube. I think you'll be pretty fascinated. But David, what's your favorite species of octopus?
Sure. Well, you can't pick just one, but I'll pick one for today.
Okay.
Which is Octopus tetrachus, which is the common Sydney octopus or the gloomy octopus. And it's my favorite because I've been very privileged to work at a site where they have just amazing behavior interacting with one another. And that's just so much fun to watch that in any given day, there'll be at least 1 hour where they're my favorite species.
Nice. Gloomy octopus. I love that. Stephanie, how about you?
My pick is somewhat similar in that it's one that I have worked on and am currently very slowly describing. It's a type of jack octopus that me and my team, when I worked in California, we did not discover it. That is commonly said, but I was enough to say that I was going to describe it, and so now I discovered it. And now I must describe it. So that's my favorite.
All right. Kathryn, do I need to ask?
I got to go with the giant Pacific. I mean, they always will hold a special place in my heart.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How about Qiaz?
I guess I have to say the blue ring octopus, or rather like the whole set of different blue ring octopus, including the blue lined octopus that's found in the east coast of Australia. So like instead of rings on the mantle, they have lines. Oh. It's just mesmerizing.
Nice. And Henry?
Probably not a surprise either, but I'm going to go with the giant Pacific octopus as well. I spend my whole day in or thinking about the Puget Sound. And yeah, that's the species I've had the privilege to interact with the most. And it's also the largest, and it's just really impressive animal. So I'm going to be a homer, root for the home team, and go GPO.
That's not too surprising, but they're pretty amazing animals, so hard to blame you. So that's all the time we have for this evening. I just want to say thanks again to our speakers. You all did an absolutely amazing job, and this is the part of the evening where you would typically be treated with thunderous applause. And I'm sure that people are applauding wildly at home, and maybe they'll throw some love into the chat for y'all. But really appreciate your time, your insights, your expertise. It's just octopuses are endlessly fascinating. I'm sure we could do another couple of hours talking about them some more. So Now, thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed tonight's free science event and want to see more like this, please do make a donation to the Seattle Aquarium. For those who made donations through the Super Chat tonight, thank you so much. You all have been so generous tonight. And again, your support goes towards conservation programming in the Puget Sound and beyond. And the ocean needs us more than it ever has. Now, if you're local, you should come see us. The aquarium is open again. We are at a reduced capacity with time ticketing, a one-way flow. We are super concerned with the health and safety of both of our staff and our visitors. It is a little bit of a different experience, but it's kind of cool in its own way. There's no crowds, there's no waiting. So it's almost like having a little private tour. And now you can take advantage of plan ahead pricing. So if you purchase your tickets online in advance, you can save a few bucks. So that's pretty cool too. Now, our next Lightning Talks event is already on the books. It will be April 22nd. And since we've already talked about all the most fascinating creatures of the ocean, the sharks and the octopuses, I guess we'll just do sea otters. So if you want to learn something about sea otters, then mark your calendar for April 22nd. And in fact, you can already go to the Seattle Aquarium website and register right now. And so set yourself a time, so you'll get that link when the time comes. I think that's going to be an amazing event. Seattle Aquarium has always had a special place in our hearts for sea otters. And so I know that event is already lining up to be pretty special. So thank you all again for joining us for Lightning Talks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit something. And we hope you'll see you again in another Lightning Talks event or in one of our other virtual events, and hopefully soon at the aquarium again. So thanks again. Thanks to our speakers, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.